Great morning to one and all. I am Chetan, Senior Area Manager based at Bangalore from SANOFI. I take this opportunity to welcome you all for today's e-medical writing workshop. Couple of minutes, I'll just highlight on the few key initiatives what SANOFI has been taking in the days to come. Like we at SANOFI always believes in aiming to protect, enable, and support people who are facing health challenges, and we always believe in empowering life. Thus, we provide a full continuum of care. When we look at SANOFI, a glance at worldwide, we are based in more than 100 countries who are having more than 1 lakh employees worldwide. And in the last 5 years, that is between 2015 to 2020, we have come up with 6 major innovations. To name a few, we have launched Dengvaxia in the field of dengue, and Prolvent we have launched in the field of cardiovascular diseases. 2Geo is our research molecule in the field of diabetes, and Serilumba in the field of rheumatoid arthritis. And SANOFI in India is present for more than 60 plus years. We have 3 state-of-art manufacturing sites. The medicines and the vaccines which has been manufactured in these sites have been exported to more than 60 plus countries. And we have more than 6,000 employees working for SANOFI India. Thus, SANOFI partnering at every step of health journey. We have some good old house brand names. We are the originators of those brands. To name a few, we are the makers of Allegra, we are the makers of Avil, we are the makers of Combiflam, Amaryl, Lantus when it comes to diabetes treatment. In cardiology, we are the originators of Clexane, Cardace. Of course, in epilepsy, we do have Valparin and Frisium. SANOFI's efforts to combat COVID-19 pandemic, like we are working hand in hand with GSK to come out with a possible candidate in form of a vaccine by the end of 2021. And we take the pride in treating the first patient outside US who was a part of a clinical trial program for patients with severe COVID-19. By now, we all know, we have heard about the drug hydrochloroquine. We are the originators, and SANOFI has donated more than 100 million doses of hydrochloroquine by now to more than 50 plus countries. I take this opportunity to welcome today's chairperson, Dr. Vaikuntraju sir. As we all know, sir is a professor of pediatric neurology in Indira Gandhi Institute of Child Health, Bangalore. Done DM pediatric neurology in AIMS, UG and PG both has been done in Bangalore Medical College. And the academic activities, when we see, sir has more than 100 publications in his name and more than 100 other preview articles, 20 chapters in various textbooks, 250 abstracts in various conferences, and has delivered lecture more than 150 talks. He has been the editor and the author of the book, of the textbook on cerebral palsy and early stimulation, coordinator of the Pediatric Neurology Fellowship at Indira Gandhi Institute of Child Health. Before I hand it over to Doctor, I would like to highlight on the flow of the meeting. My talk will be followed by the introduction of the chairperson's welcome note, which in turn will be followed by the speaker talks. My sincere request and appeal to all the attendees would be, since we are in webinar mode today, if there is any questions in mid of the talk, you can always use the chat box or the Q&A session, which is visible at the bottom of the screen. The same will be addressed by the speakers at the end of their session. With this, I take this opportunity to once again welcome Dr. Vaikuntraju sir to take the proceedings.
Thank you. So good morning to all. So I thank the outset SANOFI for giving this opportunity to for this medical writings. So we'll be having 2 talks today session. One is manuscripts development and submission. So there are 2 eminent speakers for today's sessions. First speaker is Anita Gauri. So she's the head of medical publication of SANOFI India. She has a strong academic background. She has done master degrees in life science and specialization in neurosciences. And she has exhaustive certificate programs at American Medical Writers Association. She has more than 13 years of experience across various publications and various medical writing workshops. And she has initiated many projects with a very good concept. And she has conducting various medical shops for how to write medical records. and she has more than 300 publication in various publications in various platforms from SANOFIs. And she has also conducted earlier medical writing workshop in our Indira Gandhi Institute of Child Health, and it was a good success. So our today's second speaker is Rohan Mitra, and he's a well-known speaker, and he has done PhD in cancer biology from NIMANS, and he's also a recipient of DST project grant, and he has more than 8 years experience in medical writing. Earlier, he was working in Novartis and Life Systems Private Limited, and he has also many publications for his credits. So I will welcome first talk Dr. Anita Gauri for how to prepare a manuscript and for medical writing. So Dr. Anita.
Thank you, Dr. Venkat Raju. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in today morning, a beautiful Sunday morning. And without much ado, let's begin with the session. So, I'm going to start my slides. And Chetan, I'd like a confirmation that they are visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. It is visible. You can go for the.
Great. Okay. So, just to give you a little background into who we are, Rohan and I are managing a team called Amrit at Sanofi. Amrit stands for All India Medical Writing Team. And as most of you all know, Amrit is a very mythological name. It is the nectar that was churned out of the sea, and the gods drank it and it imparted immortality. In that context, most, publications that come out are immortal. So you leave behind a legacy of the work you have done, and that's how we get our name. We work on Sanofi related studies, and we've been conducting this session as part of an academic program of Sanofi because we realized while we are managing this department, in order to spread good publication practices, it is very, very important that we promote them with the doctor fraternity, who in turn become our investigators or have to write their own publications. So that's how we came up with this whole academic initiative. It has about 6 modules. It starts with ethics. It goes on to conference publications and abstract writing, poster development, oral presentation, and the journal publication, like the manuscript development and the journal selection and submission. For today's topic, as sir suggested, we've picked up the primary research manuscript development process. So we will not be going through the other topics, which are the ethics, abstracts, posters. We will be taking you through the manuscript development process, and we will be taking you through the journal selection and submission process. This entire experience is extremely new for us, I must tell you, because all our 150 plus workshops have been face to face. So if there are any questions, please post them in the Q&A, and we'll be very happy to answer them for you. Moving on to the core topic for the day, which is the research paper. As most of you all know, that's the currency of science. It is the form in which we need to communicate our science, the new science, the original science, and the interesting science that we have. There are various types of studies. There are the original articles, review articles, short communications. Most of them follow the same logic of writing, and we will be looking at today the original article. Now, before I really delve deep into the topic, I want you to take a moment and think the last time that you read an excellent manuscript, right from the first word of the introduction to the last word of the discussion. I'm sure most of us find it really difficult to read the entire article. But when we do come across such an article, it is extremely efficient, crisp, and it highlights all the core aspects for us. So these are the few things that we should remember when we start to write our own articles. I came across a very interesting word that said lazy efficient. So while we skim through what is important in an article, from a writer's perspective, it is very important to make sure that it is efficient for all the lazy people as well. So you need to make sure the article is relevant, understandable in simple words, and can be skimmed through quickly. So while it is true that the quality of the paper depends primarily on the quality of the study, it also really depends a lot on how you write that study. And in most cases, people find it very difficult to write about their own work, and that is called the writer's block. So today's session is going to take you through a series of progressive steps that must be followed when preparing a manuscript for a peer reviewed journal. So, as we know, preparing a manuscript for publication is hard work. There's a lot of data, and we need to strike a balance between being comprehensive and being crystal clear. We need to ensure that we have and engage the reader's interest throughout the manuscript. As you all know, there's abundant advice available on the internet, but just to take you through some errors that everyone conducts, this is an image that says that, but most of our useful publication is in the journal. Don't do it, it's already been done. So start writing when you have something original and something new to talk about. It is extremely critical that you pick up the USP of your article, of your study, the unique selling point, because that's the point around which you're going to weave the story, and that is the point that you have to highlight to your editors, to your readers, to your reviewers. The second aspect is the ethics. So while we are not going through the ethics part of it today, it's very important that you're ethical in your approach to writing a manuscript. Your authorship criteria should be based on the ICMJE criteria, and your manuscript should be written in an ethical way. So it's very, very critical that you look at all the aspects of ethics before you start writing your manuscript. The third aspect is that you have a lot of data, and you feel that, oh, I need to push everything into one article. Well, then you really need to strategize and structure your article. First is discuss the core endpoints, the primary, the secondary endpoints that you had set out to study. Anything else that is exploratory in manner or is a sub analysis should be given, if it has been incorporated in your primary paper, maybe those results can be incorporated as supplementary information, or you can come up with a secondary paper on that study. So it's very important that you are allowed five tables and five tables of figures within your manuscript, and you strategize the core results that have to be presented in the manuscript. The other very important aspect that we come across is that we should not have overlapping data to be published. If your senior has had success in publishing data of 100 patients, just adding another 8, 10, 20, 50 patients without incremental information to your study, can contribute to redundant publication. So it's very critical that you don't fall in the loop of redundant publications. Every publication should have its own key messages and why you are publishing it. And while we can discuss about why we need to do publications, it's important from an institute perspective, important from advancing science perspective. It all boils down to one thing. When we write something, we need to keep the editor expectations in mind, which are clearly stated in the journal guidelines. Your manuscript needs to be aligned to those expectations to have a chance to be reviewed in the journal. So when we start on this footing, having clarity that yes, when we start a manuscript, we need to be ethical, we need to keep in mind the guidelines, we need to structure our data. These are the basic elements that we keep in mind before we start writing a manuscript. Now, when you start writing, you need some help. You need to go through some guidelines. So depending on the study design, there are guidelines available as per the study designs freely on the Equator Network. You can just go to this website and see for every study design there is a guideline available. Now, why do you need to go through a guideline? A guideline, as you know, has a checklist and explanatory notes. It makes sure that it's that map that you follow, that you don't make mistakes, and you incorporate everything that is critical to be a part of your paper. These guidelines somewhere are also used by reviewers to check whether everything important is part of the paper or not. So it's very important that you go through these guidelines. Now, what are these guidelines? You have the ICMJE guideline, which is the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors Guidelines. These are the most comprehensive and the most influential guidelines in biomedical journals. It has everything that you want to know before you start writing your paper. So how are you going to structure your introduction, your discussion? What are the editors looking at? So this is a very, very important guideline. The other guideline that is critical from your perspective is if you are working on a company sponsored research, you should go through the good publication practices guidelines for company sponsored research. It speaks about our authorship criteria, reimbursements, professional medical writers that write company sponsored research, data sharing statements. So this aspect of the company sponsored research is covered by the GPP3. In September 2020, there was an update that they are coming up with an updated version, which will be the GPP4, and that's in draft version right now. So, like I said, what is the study design? According to that, you can pick up the guideline. Now, this is one example to that. You have the CONSORT, which is the Consolidated Standards of Reporting Trials, which is followed for the randomized controlled trials. Now, it has a checklist, and you go through the checklist. For example, in the title, it will mention, please mention your study as randomized in the title. So when you framed your title, you know that the word randomized has to be there. So this is the checklist that you follow. If you're into an observational study, then the strobe statement is the guideline that you can follow to write your research. The other thing that we need to keep in mind is, you need to register your study before the first patient is in, because most of the journals, all biomedical journals which are authentic, do not accept research which is not registered. So there are registries like the clinicaltrials.gov. In India, we have the CTRI, and these numbers, the registration numbers, are required when you're writing your publications. Even the Declaration of Helsinki says that every research study involving human subjects must be registered in a publicly accessible database before recruitment of the first subject. So when you write in your method section that you have followed the Declaration of Helsinki, it is critical that you have registered your study. Then talking about trainings, while you might surf the web for a lot of trainings on medical publications, one place, where you can get them all is the WAMI website, which is the World Association of Medical Editors. They've put across a training sheet for all stakeholders in medical publications, if I may say, which is editors, reviewers, and writers. This sheet has all the programs, that are available on the web, whether they are free or there's a charge to it, and for which stakeholder it is, whether it's for the editor, reviewer, or writer, and whether it's a self-paced program or it is scheduled at a particular time and needs to end at a particular time. I'm sure most of the participants here are also knowing about Coursera. Coursera has programs from Stanford, it has programs from Duke University in medical publications, and it's extremely useful if you could go through those. They are self-paced and they help you get deeper into the subject of writing your research paper. So, having said that and set the context and the ground for what all we should know when we plan to write a research paper, now let's go a little deeper in understanding how we should start, when we want to write a paper. So, the first thing you do is gather as much as source documents as you can, protocol, your statistical report, if you have a clinical study report, if you have submitted abstracts, posters, if you've got feedback on those, what were the key points, the feedbacks, etc. It's time to consolidate all your source documents. You should read them, and understand how you're going to structure your paper, organize your information, choose the critical data, and conceptualize your plan. You then start conducting a literature search, for core aspects on your topic. And in this literature search, you start categorizing data that will go into the introduction, data that can be compared for the discussion, and you start plugging in information, in a very raw format, in a very raw draft format, to start structurizing or outlining your paper. Outline is a very, very critical stage of manuscript development, because this is a stage where you can gather as many thoughts as possible. You can plug, you can cut, paste information and plug it in paragraphs that you feel you should put it in. And then when you revise your outline, you can paraphrase it, you can rewrite it. So it is a stepping stone to manuscript development. If we start manuscript development by doing all the activities together, for example, researching the web, as well as start to write, as well as start revising the statement for grammatical errors, we will never complete the writing process. So it's very important that it's broken down into smaller pieces, and it's very logical to start with first studying your documents, second doing the literature search, third start framing your outline. And that outline is also a document to gather information of your other authors, of your other peer reviewers, of how you should structure this manuscript. Then we go on to the core structure of the manuscript. As we all know, there's a title page, there's an abstract. So abstract is covered in another module. We'll be starting with the structure from introduction, methods, results and discussions, acknowledgement, references. So to just take you through, introduction is why you are doing what you're doing. Methods should cover the when, where, how, and how much. Results is what have you got, and discussion is so how does this all matter. So article title as per guidelines is about 10 to 12 words. Author names, institute affiliations should be current, and your highest academic degrees as required by journal guidelines should be part of it. Contact information for corresponding authors. So anyone who's active on email, who can actively correspond with the journal when the journal writes to that person, or when the article is published, when people write, the person can respond back, should volunteer to be a corresponding author. A running title is a shorter version of your main title, which is written on the top side, top right side or top left side of your paper, to make sure that the entire paper is like one paper. Word count is required by some journals, and the number of tables and figures is required by some journals to be stated on the title page of your manuscript. Now, title. When we start writing the title, we need to be brief and clear. So in our abstract module, we also cover how we write a title, but just to set the context here of title writing, be brief, be clear. Word order is very important when you're writing a title. Important words need to be plugged into the title. Avoid abbreviations and state a species if it's a non-human study. Now, certain words that you should avoid when you're writing a title is a study of, an investigation of, development of, observations on. This is taken for granted. Improved, novel, validated. Why would you write something which is not new, which is not validated or not novel? So please understand that these things are taken for granted. These words, the title has 10 to 12 words, so these words can be used to replace words of higher importance to the study. Ensure that when you write the title, it is consistent with what your study talks about. It is consistent with what you've captured in the abstract and follows the guidance of the journal. So the conclusion of the abstract should match up to the question that you have asked in the title. Also, within the abstract, if you have anything that you're using, like a word significant, it should be substantiated with a p-value. And wherever you have a derivative, it should be substantiated with its absolute number. So while I'm not getting into the details of title and abstract, because that's another module, these are just few key things that you should keep in mind when you are writing your title and your abstract. Let's go to the core sections of the manuscript, which is the introduction. Now, to set context, the editors say that when readers have come to the end of the introduction, they should know why the research was prepared and carried out. If your problem is not stated in a reasonable and an understandable way, readers will have no interest in your solution. So, an introduction is a section where you clearly articulate the research question, state the importance of this question in the field that you're studying, note the relationships to the other studies, present the introduction in a very straightforward manner without excessive worriness, and motivate your audience to read the paper by the end of your introduction. So let's look at an example. Your introduction always starts with the general problem. For example, diabetic nephropathy is the most common cause of ESRD. Then it narrows down to a specific problem. All the screening for microalbuminuria is recommended for all diabetic patients. Many physicians do not comply with these recommendations. Then it goes to your question that you're asking. What is that you're wanting to study? To investigate a simple strategy for diabetic nephropathy, we used a decision model to simulate the effects of treating all patients with ACE inhibitors. So if I have to tell you, it is like a funnel. It's broad in the beginning and it narrows down to the question or your endpoint or your primary endpoint that you want to study. So another example that I can give you is sepsis. The general problem is sepsis is a major cause of morbidity and mortality in patients who have CKD and are receiving dialysis. Specific problem, there is no preventive treatment that has been identified. Can statins help? Animal trials have suggested positively. What is the gap that we are answering? There's limited study in humans. Previous trials were small, observational, one large population-based cohort study. And hence, our aim was to assess the effect of treatment with statin medications on the rate of sepsis in prospective cohort study of patients who had CKD and were receiving dialysis. So like you see on this, it starts with the general problem, goes to the specific, and then comes down to your primary uh, uh, endpoint that you want to study. Then we go on to the methods section. Now, a method section is like a recipe. If anyone follows that recipe, they should, at the end of it, come up with the similar outcome. And hence it is very critical that the methods section is written very well. So, the cornerstone of scientific method requires that your results be of merit and must be reproducible. And for the results to be judged reproducible, you must provide repetition of the experiments by others. So, this is the core objective of having a very good method section in your paper. Another way to emphasize this to you is by an example of the STAP study. Now, as you all can see on your screens here, this was a study conducted to discover a simple and an inexpensive way of producing stem cells in the laboratory. It was a very famous study, and once it was published, many researchers wanted to repeat it and do it in their laboratories, and they failed to reproduce the results. So they wrote back to the primary researcher, who was then questioned and was asked to repeat her results, but she failed as well. And then there was a public apology for this study. And all this happened because they discovered methodological flaws when the paper was published and the research was not reproducible. So, like you can see, the lines that I have underlined, the researcher in her resignation said, I worked hard for 3 months to show significant results, but I'm so exhausted now and extremely puzzled. I'm keenly aware of my responsibility for troubling a number of people because of my inexperience. I can't even find the words for an apology. So it was a mass shame to have this paper and not being able to reproduce the results. The evidence of misconduct was very clear. And the primary researcher, as you can read in the last para, was given 3 months by the institute to replicate her results in the presence of other researchers and even in surveillance cameras. And they were not able to reproduce their results. And that's when the Japan Minister for Science and Technology expressed regret and very clearly said that wrongness based on inexperience cannot be accepted in science. So, methods is a section which transparently discloses to the world what you did, and how you have managed to get these results. Because if people want to improvise on your study, want to repeat and get the same results, they should follow the method section. Okay. Uh, so the method section includes information that was available at the time of the plan. So when you were making your protocol, which is the plan of the study, you plan to recruit 400 patients. Eventually in your study, due to some unavoidable circumstances of deviations, you recruited 200 patients. What you will write in your method sample size is 400 patients because that was the plan. What happened in your study is the results section and goes into the results. So you recruited 200 patients and there were deviations, etc., go as part of the results. The methods covers the study designs, ethical considerations, your eligibility criteria, if there's a randomization, the method of randomization, assessments that you did, sample size, statistical analysis, and the software that you used to do this analysis with the information of the manufacturer. If it's a complicated study design, study figures or processes depicted through figures work best because, studies designs can be understood or simplified by putting them in a process diagram. The methods figure should not contain proprietary names. You should follow generic names in your manuscript. Now the results section. We have a lot of data, but what do the editors say? The compulsion to include everything, leaving nothing out, does not prove that you have unlimited information. It only proves that you lack discrimination. So, like I said, the results section has to, have those five tables of figures around the core data that you want to talk. Anything extra that you have to say can go in supplementary information, or you can do a sub analysis, etc. Always remember, the results section when you're writing describes the data, it does not interpret. A was higher than B. That's the description. Why A was higher than B goes into your discussion section. It is not part of your results section. The presentation of data can be chronological. You can have the primary objective presented first, secondary objective second, or the most important results to the least important results. Remember, the baseline characteristics should be covered. Data should not only be presented as derivatives like 50%, 100%, 72%, but also the denominator and the numerator should be stated. There should be consistency in the data that you write within the manuscript, within the text, the tables, and the figures. So if you are rounding off values, for example, if you round off 5.47 to 5.5, do that consistently in your abstract, in your text, in your figure, or your table. Please do not have 5.47 in your abstract, 5.5 in your text, 5.47 in your table. That's not good way of writing a manuscript. If you're using a figure, please ensure it's of the highest quality and your images are of the highest quality. You should use tables when you're showing specific values. If you're showing trends, relationships, graphs and figures are a better way of showing the same data. Do not duplicate the data between the graphs and the tables. Each of them are prepared on a separate page as per the guidelines. They have self-explanatory headers or footers. The units of measurements are very clear. So this is an example of a table. You have a table title, column titles. The internal grid lines are missing. The table is clean. This is the way we present and write in the manuscript. And any abbreviation used is defined in the footnote. If you want to show proportions, use pie charts. If you want to show categories, comparisons, please use bars. If there's a change in x versus the y in relationship, please use a line graph. Whenever you're using graphs, ensure that they are meeting the journal guidelines. They have the major tick marks, the numbers with the major tick marks, the legends are defined well, and the figure title or the figure legend is given very, very clearly. The axes are marked. You have the units where you have written the axis labels. So each aspect of the figure, the graph should be very, very clear. Similarly, if you're using a bar graph, your standard deviation bars, need to be part of it. If you're using a image, it has to be of very high quality. Usually journals accept 300 dots per inches. So for a demographic data, you will be using a table. But if you have to show an improvement for example, in HbA1c from baseline to 3 months to end of treatment at 6 months in 2 treatment groups, I would prefer to use a bar graph because you can show more data. You can compare the change from baseline to 3 months, from 3 months to 6 months. So, even though some of y'all may say, okay, there could be a line graph to this, but a bar may help me put more data and my story can be more complete in this image. So it's very important that you choose, the format in which you want to present the data, depending on what you want to communicate to your audience. Now, this is a table that I picked up to show you how bad it is. The rule of the thumb says that if you are preparing a table or a figure, it should be stand alone. That means if someone plugs it out of your manuscript and pastes it somewhere else, they should be able to understand what's happening in that table and that figure without having to refer to your manuscript. Now, if we look at this table, while there's a title to this table, I have no idea what is BW, what is BX, and within the table itself, the decimal values vary in every row. Some places there are 5 decimal values, some places there are 3, and it's extremely difficult to understand what's happening in this table. So this is not the way you prepare your tables and your graphs. They have to be stand-alone representations of your data. Let's look at this graph. As you may notice, the legend is missing, the standard deviation bars are not there, the axis labels are not there, the units are not there. So this is definitely not a good graph. We try to correct it, and we have some title here that says amount of chlorophyll in the leaves. But is this still complete? Well, if I improvise it further and I have a title that says a comparison between the wild type and the mutant plants and the amount of chlorophyll in the leaves at various development stages, and then I present this graph, we know for sure what's happening within the graph, within the image, without having to refer to the manuscript. This is what I called a stand-alone representation of your data. So, like I said, please pick up the most important feature of the data that you want to present. Then think, how would you best present it with the maximum number of enhancements or details that you can give about the data? And when you present this data, what is the conclusion that your audience drives from that image or from that table? When you can answer these 3 questions, you know you have successfully developed a good table or a good graph. There are several guidelines that help us improvise our results section. And some of the most useful are this particular paper, which is written by the ex-president of the World Association of Medical Editors. And it's called the Common Statistical Mistakes in Manuscripts Submitted to Biomedical Journals. I'm going to take you through some of the key aspects that this paper discusses. Sometimes we noticed that people are confused between whether they should state the mean or the median. When you have a normally distributed data, you state the mean. But if your data is not normally distributed, you state the median. While we can figure out, what is normal and not normally distributed with the bell curve, if you just look at the one shortcut way is, if you look at the standard deviation value, and if that exceeds half the mean value, then it is unlikely that your distribution is normal. In that case, you should state the median. Standard error of mean is not a measure of dispersion. It is only the precision in which you have calculated the mean. In order to give a dispersion, you should always mention the standard deviation along with the mean value and not the standard error of mean. Then, we have data that goes into several decimal points. When you get a statistical output, it can sometimes show 37.351. But is that the real way that we want to present? No, 351 adds no extra value and only adds to the readiness of the article. So we can consolidate that and round it off consistently throughout the paper. So we'll have 37.4 years. Now, when your denominator is of a small value, for example, of 35 participants, if I write 34% had fever or 34.29% had fever, it sounds weird. Hence, it is extremely important that you give, like I said, when you have a derivative like 34%, please give the numeric value, which is 12, because it makes more sense for me to read that out of 35 participants, 12 had fever. That 12 could be 34%. That's okay. So the rule of the thumb says that number of total participants less than 100, when you have a value of the percentage that exceeds the number of the participants like it is here, then we should not report any. So 34% is better than 34.29. But if the number, that is the denominator, is below 20, then don't report a percentage at all. This is very critical in the safety section of your manuscript. When you're writing adverse events, adverse events are seen in a subpopulation of your study. In that subpopulation, you calculate the percentage of whatever adverse event you've noticed. For example, if it's headache, and then if you write just the derivative, if it is 50% of your safety population, or the population that was given the drug, or whatever, that got this adverse event, the actual number of patients who had this event will be much lesser, and 50% could be an extrapolation. So hence, please, it is a very good practice to write your numeric value, numerator, denominator, along with your derivative. Now, sometimes when we get statistical output from the softwares, we have, some output that says P is less than 0.0000. So P is probability, minimum 0, maximum 1. It can never be negative. So when you have an output that says P less than 0.00, all it means is P is less than 0.001. This is how we are supposed to write and report it in the results section. Another paper that could be interesting to read is the SAMPL guidelines, sample guidelines, which help you write your results section better. Then we come to the discussion section. What do the editors say about this? Occasionally, I recognize what is called the squid technique. The author is doubtful about his facts or his reasoning and retreats behind protective cloud of ink. Many a paper loses much of its effect because a clear stream of discussion ends in a swampy delta. Now, what do they mean by this? Is we do a lot of literature search, right? Sometimes we get flown away by oversighting one statement with several references, or inducing extra information when it's not required, just because we've spent time in reading that article and getting that information out. So no, that's not the correct way to write your discussion. So what's the correct format to write your discussion? A discussion is a section where you synthesize, analyze, evaluate, interpret, and reason your data. How would you write your discussion section? Now, like I said, the key elements of a manuscript, if you go through, you read the title, you'll read the objective of the paper, you will read the conclusion of the abstract. You may go through the introduction, especially the ending that talks about the objective, the rationale of why you are doing this research. You go through the major aspects of your results, tables and figures, and you realize, that this is the data that's come out. Discussion, first paragraph is the place to synthesize this information. So the first paragraph of discussion, the last paragraph of introduction states what you want to study. The first paragraph of discussion states what have you got by studying that. It restates the central finding of your study and sets the tone and sets the context of the entire paper, and also joins the dots of your storyline. Once you restate the central finding of your study, eventual paragraphs pick up every single objective and discuss the data that you have received versus the data that is already present in the public domain. Is it similar? Is it different? How different and how similar it is? Or is it a new finding that you've come across? Now, no research is perfect, and we all know that. And hence, there is a section called limitations within your discussion. Could you have gone wrong somewhere? Could the design, have been improved in somewhere? Is there a loss to follow up? Was there a recall bias? Was there a confounding factor? These are the elements that you can put into your limitations and say that yes, the paper did lag, or the paper can be improvised if these elements would have been taken care of. Nonetheless, you've done something important. Because it is important, you've done it. It's answering a gap in research. It's something new, it's something novel, and you have to close the discussion with your conclusion that this is what we've got and this is the future direction of this particular research, in your opinion? So that's a complete discussion section, and that becomes a story in itself, because you take the reader through every aspect of your study in your understanding and in your opinion. Do not oversell your conclusion. It has to be balanced, related directly to your hypothesis. Okay? And please remember that except randomized trials, there can only be testable hypotheses and observed associations. There are no rigorous proof of cause and effect when you're doing observational studies. In randomized controlled trials, yes, you have a cause and effect, but when you're observing, please keep in mind that it should not oversell your results. It has to be balanced, and please give areas of improvement with future studies. Then you have a section called acknowledgement. So, like I said, you start with the ethics, you have the authors in mind, they follow the ICMJE criteria. But anybody else who has contributed substantially to your paper, however, does not fulfill the criteria for authorship, needs to be acknowledged. And that their names go into the acknowledgement section. So much so that every patient that has participated in the study needs to be acknowledged. Or if there was a guardian, who has signed the informed consent on behalf, we need to acknowledge the patient, their families. We need to acknowledge other investigators that could not be a part of the authorship. We need to acknowledge the statisticians, the writers. So anyone else who's contributed significantly to this paper but did not fulfill the criteria for authorship needs to go into the contributorship or the acknowledgement section. Now, competing interest or conflict of interest is another section that is part of your manuscript. And this is an area where the authors need to disclose any bias, any perceived bias that could have happened when they were conducting the study. So, if they are on the advisory boards of a particular company sponsored research, or they hold shares, or they have taken an honorarium for conducting the study, some basic elements of financial disclosures that could be a perceived bias should be disclosed. It's very important that this section is transparently written, because not disclosing could mean that you have something to hide. And disclosing transparently means this is what everybody has. They are participating in various forums. This is where I have participated, and it's left to the judgment of the reader to judge the validity of your science. But you have been honest about it. Now, a very structured way to disclose conflict or to disclose financial uh, competing interest is to use the ICMJ financial disclosure, the conflict of interest form. It has sections within it, whether you were given reimbursement for travel, or whether you participated in any meetings, etc. So it has certain sections. You say yes, no. It has an area where you can put in your own words if it is beyond what is captured, and a statement is generated, and this form can be sent to the journal house when they ask you to declare your conflict of interest, and these statements can go as part of your manuscript. So this is one structured way of collecting financial disclosures or competing interest from your co-authors and writing it yourself. Most journals follow this, but they do not have a hard and fast rule to follow. Some of them have their own forms. Some of them, will just ask you for statements. So in that case, please follow the journal guideline. But this is one structured way in which it can be collected. References section in the manuscript, anything that is common knowledge is not cited. Please remember that every research paper needs to toggle between 30 to 40 references. A review paper can maybe be slightly more, up to 40, 50 references, but a research paper is about 30 references is good, 30, 35 references. So please be choosy about what you cite. It has to be the highest and the strongest form of evidence. So if you have a statement that drug A works, and you're citing it, then look at the study design. Are you citing a cohort study? Are you citing an RCT for that data? Or are you citing a systematic or a meta analysis? Because definitely a systematic and a meta analysis is higher up the evidence grid than a cohort study. So please choose your references and cite them appropriately. uh, Anything that's in submission, if your colleague's paper is in submission but not accepted yet, it is not appropriate to cite anything which is in submission. However, if it is accepted, then you can always cite it and say it's in press. Do not cite retracted articles. Retracted is something that was not found to be of good standard, whether it was fraudulent or there was a misconduct or whatever. It was retracted from the domain. PubMed has a section where you can see retracted articles. So please don't cite anything that is retracted. Then references are usually cited. The way in which you cite references have the Harvard or the Vancouver. Harvard is usually what we do in our thesis, and Vancouver is what we follow in our manuscripts. So Vancouver is where you have this chronological, numerical way of citing the references. Harvard is where you have the author name with the year of publication. When you're asked to abbreviate journal titles, then the Index Medicus is a good way to look at something that you may not know the abbreviation for. Now, referencing could be and was a pain point, 10 years or maybe 6, 7 years back, when we had to manually cite every reference. So I remember there were times, where we used to start with the Harvard system in our outline. We used to have the name of the author and then the year of the publication. And closer to the final version of the manuscript, we would change the Harvard to the Vancouver system, because if we started with the Vancouver, it becomes very difficult when slice and dice sentences. When you move sections, you need to renumber, and that could bring in an error. Now that pain is being taken care of with softwares, and the softwares that take care of that pain is the first that I'm going to talk about is EndNote. This is a paid software, but it has the option of cite while you write. So you select your article that you want. So it has its search engine, or you can just plug that article in the EndNote software and select it, and you can just click on cite while you write. And even if you delete sentences, you modify them, you change the placement, the reference list gets updated automatically. Now, this is a paid software, but two other softwares that are free and Rohan and I know are widely used by Indian investigators, researchers, and institutes are the Zotero and Mendeley, and they do exactly the same work that EndNote would do for you. So, I also understand in MS Word, now they have come up with a referencing system. But honestly, we haven't explored those as well because we are on the EndNote system and we're very comfortable with the EndNote system. But these two, the feedback that we get is the researchers, the authors are really happy with the Zotero and the Mendeleys. Please avoid citing anything that's personal communication within your article. Even though now ICMJE has come up with a referencing format for social media. So if there's a tweet, on some path-breaking research that you want to cite a particular big name, there is a way to do it. However, we are not seeing the frequency as high as we would expect. So they are still following the traditional format of referencing in most articles. The best practices when you're writing your paper is something that was done in the past needs to be written in past tense. So your methodology, your results is past tense. Something you're discussing in the present, your intro and discussion goes in the present tense. Please revise frequency. Remember, finish in anything comes only with revision. So when you're coming up with your first draft, it may not be that perfect, but that's the place where you get feedback and you ensure you incorporate that feedback. And then over revisions, you develop the perfect paper. Do not confuse between American and British spellings. Do not clutter your paper. Please follow the guidelines. And a good practice is to start writing before your project is complete, because your methods comes directly from your protocol. Your tables and your figures, if you have the data analyzed, you can start thinking about how your tables and figures are going to get structured. If you're already written the introduction for the protocol, you will look at the updated literature and probably follow the same logic flow for your paper in the intro section. So there are certain things that you can start working on while you're already doing your research, to spend less time after you've completed your research to put together your manuscript. And you could follow a systematic approach. Usually uh, people sometimes feel, no, we need to follow from intro methods, or otherwise they prepare the methods first, the results, then they write the intro. So whatever suits you, please pick up that approach best. The abstract is always written last, because the abstract is a synopsis of all the key elements of your paper, and an abstract needs to be aligned to what is written in your paper. So abstract is usually the last that you write, because it's a synopsis of all the key elements of your paper. Get feedback and incorporate your feedback. Please allow time. Manuscript development is not a process that happens in 24 hours or 48 hours. It needs time, it needs thought, it needs patience, and it needs a lot of analytical skills. So please allow yourself that time to grow and write into a perfect paper. Also, please determine your best individual time. Some of us are most focused in the night when the world is sleeping, and that's the time when we can write the best. Some of us are most alert in the mornings. So one way to overcome writer's block is to pick up a time when your mind is most alert, because that's when the ideas flow. If you pick up a time when you're sloppy or sleepy or tired, you're going to find it very difficult to construct your paper. At every point in time, when you're writing any word, any statement, please keep in mind objectivity, clarity, and honesty in reporting research, which is very, very critical. To sum it all up for you, if there is a method, it should have been covered in the results. If there is a result, there should have been a method to get that result. Each result is discussed in the discussion section. The discussion section is not a place to add new results. All the key results have to be a part of your abstract. There's several guidance available on the internet. Equator Network Toolkit section has an entire section for authors, from planning to writing to data sharing to training opportunities. There's another one called Author Aid, which is for developing countries, and it also has guidance for authors. BMJ also has come up with its own modules on how to write a paper, what to expect, publication ethics, etc. So there is a lot of information available. Please choose what you want to know about judiciously, so that you can spend your time more constructively in knowing that information. Thank you. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Thank you very much for covering all the topics in 1 hour time and giving important clues for how to write a manuscript in just 1 hour time. I have one question. So actually this EndNote is available freely in all computers and laptop also. How it is different from paid one, and also how it is different from Mendeley reference quoting? Hello?
So, sir, to find out the difference between EndNote, Mendeley, and Zotero, I would have to work on Mendeley and Zotero, which I have really never done, to be honest, because I've always had EndNote in my laptop for the last 15 years when
Yeah.
Mendeley and Zotero were not even there. But I understand that the objective of all these softwares is the same. So it could just be that certain elements are termed differently in the software, but they end up doing the same thing. So if a very good way to look at it would be to go to a YouTube tutorial, because there are several tutorials, very compressed, 2 minutes, 3 minutes tutorials that are available on the Mendeley and the Zotero, and they can take you through live demonstration of those softwares. So it will be easier for you to just gauge which one would be better for you from that. And specifically, if there's a computer specification that they need, even that would be written there.
Okay, thank you. Actually, it is EndNote is very comfortable. I think it is available freely. So there is, I am thinking any advantage of Mendeley or EndNote.
Okay, we still pay for EndNote as an institute. So I'm not Rohan, I think last also the version, there was a whole survey done and we had to pay up for it. So I'm not too sure if as an institute now, but earlier I know, it was a paid thing. So even today as an institute, we are paying for it. So maybe as researchers, it's free to use, sir. But EndNote is it's more stable, I would say, because it was one of the first, and it's at least for me, it's been very easy to get on. Once you get a hang of EndNote, you will never leave it. It's very addictive and it's very good software.
Yeah, it is very. I am also not finding any difficulties in that.
Yeah, and I think one of the
Sir, your voice is echoing, Rohan sir.
yeah, so I'm trying to figure out.
By any chance, you are connected by two devices, sir?
No, yeah, I have, but
Rohan, you'll have to mute your laptop.
Yes, one of the devices you need to mute it.
so I guess I'll have to rejoin.
I think Rohan sir will be rejoining. I'll just. Ma'am, meanwhile, can we have a 2 to 3 minutes break, if that is okay?
Sure. Yeah. Any other questions or anybody wants to ask anything, they can post in the Q&A, or I'm okay with whatever format.
A sincere request to all the attendees, as Madam rightly mentioned, any questions you can either put it in the chat box or in the Q&A session, which is visible at the bottom of the screen. The same will be answered by the respective speakers.
Okay, when do we join back, Chetan? 5 minutes?
I'm just waiting for Rohan sir to re-log in. As soon as Rohan sir re-log in, we'll just take 2-3 minutes and we can start the next session.
Okay. No, you said we take a break, right? So we take a break of 5 minutes till Rohan joins in? Okay, great.
Sir, that would be okay, sir?
Yeah, okay, no problem.
Chetan, you are not able to add Rohan?
Sir, I'm unable to see him. Sir has not joined, I believe, as of now.
Anita, good morning. Like what name he will be logging in? It's difficult to find out.
As Rohan itself it came last time. He had logged in the name of Rohan.
Okay, maybe I don't know whether any technical issues he's facing.
We had a dry run also before the start of the meeting. Yeah, sir has joined now.
Yeah, you can move him as a panelist, right? No?
Yeah. Rohan sir, you have joined, but your audio is not connected, sir. We are able to see you as a panelist, but your audio is not connected.
Yeah.
Sir's audio is getting connected, sir.
Chetan, you have Rohan number. You can speak to him directly.
Rohan sir, even now the audio is not connected, sir. You need to, I think, try to reconnect or something.
Anita?
Yes, Ravi.
I think Rohan is not responding. I don't know any technical issues.
It shows connecting to audio. Actually, he connected through two devices and then he realized it's echoing.
Okay.
So he logged out and he tried to connect again.
Okay.
There's some speaker problem with the laptop, so he connects on the phone as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So just give him a few minutes more, a few seconds more. I think it's showing he's connecting to audio.
Yeah,
he's connected.
Yeah. Hello, sir. You are able to hear us?
Sorry for this, sir. Yeah, I can hear you.
Sir, we have taken a 5 minutes break. So we'll wait for just 2 to 3 minutes before we start the next session.
So, Chetan, maybe check with sir also.
Yes.
Maybe 10:20 or 10:20. Once sir gives a okay, then we can start it.
Sure, sir.
Yeah, 5 minutes is okay, not issue. Not.
Sure, sir, sure. Vaikuntha sir, once you give a okay, then Rohan will start, sir.
Vaikunth sir?
Yes, you can start now.
Yes. Rohan sir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. A very good morning to everyone in this webinar. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Clear.
Yes, yes, Rohan. Yeah.
Okay. So basically, in the natural progression of manuscript development process and towards journal submission is selection of a particular journal where it's best suited, the manuscript is best suited for a publication. The problem is that in this process of manuscript, development and submission to a journal and the publication is that this particular step of targeting the right journal is often overlooked or ignored. So we'll get into the details of what we can do to avoid situations which may, increase the timeline of your publication. Now, what are the journals? It provides a forum for communication among scientists. We all know that, in a publication, once a publication comes in a journal, all over the world, scientists or peers or any audience for that matter can view it. So it's a forum for communication among the scientists. It sets the intellectual standards in a field. We all know that most of the scientific journals where we publish are peer-reviewed. Therefore, it sets the intellectual standards of the science that we publish. It sets the agenda of what to study. It provides an institutional memory of the field because once, as we know that once a manuscript is published in a journal, it is eternal. It is there for everyone to see once we are gone from our own responsibilities. It brings information to the public. It certifies the author's work that is authentic because it's a peer-reviewed journal. It can advance the author's career also. Now, what are the challenges towards publication? There are policies or guidelines to enhance transparency. It has increased the volume of manuscript received by the journals. As we know, during our COVID situation also, there are, flood of manuscripts that people are trying to get published. Therefore, we can only imagine what the journals or publishers must be facing right now in this situation. There will be thousands of articles which people are trying to publish. This poses the challenges to both the journals and the authors. Hence, there is a need for journals to increase the efficiency of the submission process and the authors to identify suitable venues to publish. This can be accomplished by close collaboration among stakeholders in the process. The stakeholders are the journal publishers and the authors. The objective of this module is to help bridge the gap between authors' practices and editor expectations through guidance on journal selection and submission. So the journal selection process. There are a plethora of journals to choose from, as we know. In any given field, for in the field of diabetes, we have a plethora of journals. But still, there is a competition for space in this journal, which is very intense. As we know that there are competition in publishing in very good journals, and the cost of publication is very high. So these are some of the points to be kept in mind. And the rejection rates are very high in a very good journal. Where to start? So the journal selection process should start as soon as possible. We may think that we should first develop the manuscript and getting it reviewed and then start the process of journal selection, which is not the right method of doing it, because once we have the manuscript ready, we should be able to submit it as soon as possible. Therefore, the process of journal selection should actually start hand in hand with the manuscript development process itself. Before you start to write, the formatting issues of a manuscript, style issues of a particular journal, and the scope of the journal has to be kept in mind. Therefore, the process of selection of a journal should go hand in hand with the manuscript development process. So there are a few steps in journal selection. Step 1 is conduct an internal assessment. What do we mean by an internal assessment? Internal assessment can be where do we eventually want to publish the manuscript, which is the best suited journal, which has a large audience or a particularly selected targeted audience that we want to view our manuscript. Step 2 is research journal choices. This can be various. There can be various points through which we can choose our research journal and identify the top choices. By doing all these internal assessment and research journal choices, we can eventually come down to say 2 to 5 journals which are best suited for our manuscript. Now these are the detailed steps for an assessment of a selection of a journal. First is the audience, who we are trying to target through our manuscript. It can be researchers, it can be clinical practitioners, it can be insurers, it can be government agencies, it can be geographic regions. The medium of the journal is also very important. There are some journals which only publish in electronic format. There are some journals which only publish in print format. There are journals, most of the journals do publish in both electronic and print formats. There are journals which are indexed and there are journals which are non-indexed. We'll come to the detail of this indexing in a later slide. Then comes a very important aspect, which is access. There are subscription-based journals, there are pay-per-view journals, and there are open access journals. By subscription, we mean to say that you may have institutional subscriptions to say most of the Wiley publisher journals or Springer Nature publisher journals. So if you have that kind of subscription, you can easily get access to full text journals. Whereas if you do not have access, you may not be able to access it, and then you have to pay per view, which is say anything in the range of $20 to $50 per journal. And then there is open access, in which case the author or the institution pays for the journal to be open access, and anyone in this world can see this manuscript. There are different types of journals which are general. There are specialty journals, surgical, non-surgical. There are society-based journals. There are proprietary journals. Some of the journals are locally focused. Some of them are international, and some of them want additional data. And then there is time. Many journals may take between a few weeks to few months. Some of the journals have very rigorous processes and slow processes in place. It may take a year or so to publish after you submit your journal. Publish in parallel to presenting at a medical congress. This is another possibility wherein you are presenting your data to a international medical congress, and you can announce that the next day your manuscript will be available. So the step 2 of journal choices is request input. You should request input from fellow authors, trusted peers, librarians, information specialists, sponsor, or academic mentors. Next is to look for PubMed index journals. Find journals that have published articles with topics. So if you have a broader area of, say, in the field of diabetes, you should target your manuscript towards journals that have broader interests in the field of diabetes, and you can search with the search string in the PubMed to see what are the journals best suited for diabetes. There are directories available in which you can paste your title of the manuscript or the abstract of the manuscript and explore the journals as they give you a list of journals after reading through your abstract or title. The first of them is JANE, which is Journal Author Name Estimator. This is very useful. You have to simply enter the title and or the abstract of the article. Click on Find Journals, Find Authors, or Find Articles. JANE compares your document to millions in the Medline to find the best matching journals, authors, or articles for you. The next one is journal selector. It works similar to Jane. And I think I'll also add one more avenue to select your journal, which is Academic Accelerator. It is powered by Google. It's a recent addition to the journal selection process, and it's a very good option for selecting your journal. Now coming to instruction to the authors from a journal. The first thing that we have to keep in mind is the scope, which is impact factor, coverage, aims, target audience. Second is policies. Policies of a journal may include anything, from the forms, which are in very detailed format. Some of the journals may require, scope policies for observational studies. So these are the things that we have to keep in mind before submission. If we do not have, NCT registration for a particular trial or a study, the journals have mandatory policies that we have to have NCT or CTRI documentation of a particular study. Therefore, we may not be able to publish in those journals if we do not have these registered studies. What are the charges of the journal? There are open access or pay per page policies of journals, which can have anything from $1,500 to $3,000 US. So this is a very important point to keep in mind while selecting a journal. Review timelines, either it's fast track or not. Whether it's fast track or not, these days during the COVID pandemic, most of the journals are trying to fast track their journal review, peer review process. However, it's not always possible due to the lack of peer reviewers themselves. Acceptance or rejection metrics. Most journals, most peer-reviewed high-end journals will have 80 to 90% rejection rate. So that is another thing to keep in mind before journal selection process. Conditions, as I discussed, there can be conditions demanded from the journal. IRB or EC approval can be demanded. Reporting guidelines, that is for observational studies, for that matter, is scope, can be demanded, or clinical trial registration. Now, one of the major factors for selecting a journal has been throughout is impact factors. Impact factor is the average number of times published papers are cited up to 2 years after the publication. However, the validity of impact factor has been criticized as it focuses on citations in a rather very short time span, and it leads to unwarranted focus on high-ranked journals. We also, in our mind, have a bias towards high-end journals. If we have some data which corroborates with our own data in our study, we tend to look up to journals which are published in, say, NJM or JAMA, all these high impact factor journals. Therefore, we try to or tend to unintentionally ignore, publications that have happened in, say, a two impact factor journal, which is also very good, but it is not an impact factor which compares with JAMA or NJM. Therefore, we don't cite it. And in this process itself, we tend to increase the impact factor for next year for NEJM or JAMA and ignore the other small impact factor journals. So there is a particular article published in 2008 by Farooq Habibzadeh, and it basically lays out the uses and misuses of the journal impact factor. So what are the journal selection processes? There is pre-submission inquiries. We'll get to the details of this. Then there is manuscript preparation. So while we were discussing, while Ananta was discussing about the manuscript preparation process, you can see that the pre-submission inquiry towards a journal or a journal selection does start before the manuscript preparation process. Hence, it's very important. Third is the cover letters. And fourth is review, revision, and resubmission. What are the pre-submission inquiries? From the author's perspective, this is timely and useful feedback. So what we do is Before even submitting to a journal, in order to save some time, we prepare pre-submission inquiries towards a journal editor or editorial office, which states briefly the findings of our manuscript and whether it is within the scope of this journal or not. The editor or editorial office comes back within a day or maximum within a week, saying that this particular data is interesting and you may go ahead and submit in our journal, or they may also suggest that it is not within the scope of this journal at this point and you can submit in another journal. This saves the time because within a week's time you get to know whether you can submit your article in this particular journal or not, and avoid the waste of time by actually submitting in the journal and then wait for a month to get a decision from the editorial office. During a pre-submission inquiry, the editor or editorial office can suggest for improvement in your manuscript. It recommends for more suitable reviews, which may be other journals. It also gives you an opportunity to clarify important questions if you have. From the journal's perspective, it is a pre-screening process and identifying suitable manuscripts. Therefore, the journal also saves time. Conserving resources and providing quick decisions, it is possible. It relays constructive feedback towards the authors, and it enhances the editorial guidance. Now, while preparing a manuscript for a particular journal which we have selected, we have these particular points that we have to keep in mind, which is adhere to journal's instructions, check grammar, include all critical information that you want to publish, and do an internal consistency check of the data. The next thing that comes in our mind is the preparation of cover letter. So the cover letter, which is often ignored or not taken care seriously, is the first summary of the study that is read by an editor. So as we know that in a manuscript, the abstract is a very important part because the editors probably, once you submit a manuscript, the editors probably go through the cover letter and the abstract to decide whether they want to go ahead with the peer review process or not. So the cover letter has to be written properly. It provides the first and sometimes the only chance to convey the study's significance and relevance to the journal's audience, which means that if you do not capture in brief the findings, the most important findings of your abstract, and try to convey to the editor why it is novel and important for the audience to see this particular manuscript, the editor may not be interested in accepting your manuscript for peer review process. It demonstrates commitment to making the publication a success. This is an example of a cover letter where we particularly capture the strongest points in our manuscript. We'll spend a minute on this. So as you see, within 2 or 3 sentences in each paragraph, we have to capture the short summary of the study, the statement of relevance or the novelty of this particular study, and we have to also state that we are complying with the journal requirements, and then a thank you note. So most of us who have published any manuscript may have seen this, that the basic search engine to submit a manuscript is Manuscript Central. As the internet has become more central to journal communication, its importance in the submission of articles has also increased. This system facilitates online submission, assignment of reviewers, online peer review process, and associated dialogue with authors and referees. Link to it from the instruction of authors on the journal homepage. So before submitting a manuscript to a journal, we should open the instruction to authors page and see what are the requirements for the journal. today's time, it has become very important to identify authors specifically with their ORCID ID. What it is exactly? So ORCID ID, for example, there are two researchers in the field in the name of Rohan Mitra, in my name. So how do you identify which Rohan Mitra is publishing this particular manuscript? So ORCID ID helps us to decide that. It is very easy to register yourself in ORCID. Just go to the ORCID website, register yourself with your name, your previous publications, your institution, and your designation. And you create your ORCID ID, and this will be very unique to you. Later on, if you shift your or move to another institution, you can edit your institution, but this particular ORCID ID will travel with you anywhere you publish. So what happens these days is, if you are a corresponding author for a particular manuscript and submitting in a journal, the first step that is required to create your account in the journal is through ORCID ID. So once you put your unique ORCID ID in the journal portal, submission portal, it automatically collects information from ORCID website and creates your own registration in the journal. And this will be unique to you only. So the other Rohan Mitra with another institution and other information will not be mixed up. Now coming to the peer review process, as you see in this cartoon, it's very probably very easy. People are just waiting to hand over the manuscript to the journal editor, and your manuscript gets accepted. So these are the pros and cons of different peer review systems for authors. There is one system which is called top-down or trimming off. The advantages of it is prestigious journals, they conduct very detailed review. These advantages are high chance of rejection, which is somewhere between 60 to 90%, and it has a very slow decision-making process. Another system is bottom-up or weeding out. They have high chances of acceptance and rapid decision-making. The disadvantages are these are less prestigious journals, and they have a cost per page or open access or other policies. This is the single editor system. This is one of the simplest systems. The editor scans and sends the manuscript to the reviewers. Reviewers or referees conduct a detailed review that includes suggestions for improving the manuscript and whether it should be published or not. But it is a slow process. The second process is journals run by academic or societies. These editors are unpaid. The peer reviewers are also probably unpaid. The editor scans and sends to the relevant board members. This is the very slow process, less detailed review. And there are in-house editors.